The first time I noticed something was wrong, it was the way he didn't blink. I was balancing 3 plates up my left arm, a habit I'd perfected over 3 years at Lucia's, a restaurant tucked into the narrow belly of North End Boston, where the lighting was always too dim, and the wine stains on the tablecloths were worn like badges of honor. The plates held veal piccata, linguine al nero, and a risotto that had taken Marco 40 minutes of careful stirring. My feet ached. My lower back was singing a familiar song of complaint, and then I looked at him. He sat in the corner booth, the one with the view of both doors. I'd noticed even before serving him. Alone. Expensive suit that fit like it had been tailored to his exact body. Dark hair threaded with silver at the temples, though his face was too carved, too sharp to be old. Mid-40s, maybe. The kind of face that made other men in the restaurant turn slightly, register something, then look away. Dominance reads from the bones. But his eyes. Christ. His eyes never moved from the street outside. Most people at Lucia's were romantics or regulars or both. Couples leaning so close their wine glasses seemed to blend. Businessmen laughing too loudly. Older Italian families who'd been coming since before I was born. This man was none of those things. He was still, completely, utterly still, the way a predator is still. I delivered the plates to table 6, the elderly couple celebrating their anniversary, their hands touching across the breadbasket, and felt the weight of his attention shift. Not onto me directly, just aware of my movement through the space. The awareness made my skin prickle. "You're staring," my coworker Gia said, brushing past me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was talking about the anniversary couple, but I knew she meant him. I'm not. But I was. Or rather, I was trying not to be. Which was the same as staring in the way that people stare at car accidents. He ordered his food through Marco, who emerged from the kitchen like a ghost when this man simply raised one finger. One finger. I'd never seen Marco move that fast. No menu, no question about preferences. Marco just nodded and disappeared. "Risotto," Marco muttered when he returned to the kitchen. "Veal. The wine, the 1,989 Barolo." "How do you know?" I asked. Marco's hands stilled over his prep station. He was old, ancient, really, had owned Lucia's for 30 years, and his eyes had that look that old men get when they're remembering something they wish they could forget. "Some men," he said quietly, "you just know what they want." I should have asked more. I would have, but the dinner rush hit like a wave, and for the next hour, I was lost in that strange ballet of service, the muscle memory, the smile that lived on my face, the careful geometry of plates and silverware and wine pours. It was the kind of work that let your mind wander while your body remained precise. My mind wandered to the corner booth. He ate slowly, each bite deliberate. He didn't check his phone, I noticed, because everyone checked their phones, even people who pretended they didn't. He didn't fidget. He didn't make conversation with the lone waitress who'd served him. He simply existed in that space like he owned it, which, as I would later learn, was the only way he knew how to exist anywhere. When I brought the check, I made sure not to look at him directly. "Thank you," he said. His voice was low, textured like stone, worn smooth by time. It landed somewhere in my chest and didn't move. "Of course," I said, and I could hear myself sounding professional, distant, which was good because I was beginning to feel neither of those things. "Can I get you anything else?" "No." But he looked at me then. Really looked, and in that moment, the restaurant seemed to narrow into just that corner booth, the candlelight catching the edge of his jaw, the way his pupils were so dark they seemed to swallow light. He had a scar that ran from his cheekbone to the edge of his mouth, thin as a thread, and I wondered what kind of violence left a mark so precise. "You're not from here," he said. What do you mean? "The way you move. Like you're apologizing to the furniture." He tilted his head slightly. "Where are you from?" No one had ever asked me that in 3 years of serving. No one had ever looked at me like I was a problem worth solving. "Portland," I said. "Originally, I came to Boston for school. Stayed." "What did you study?" "Linguistics." His expression shifted. Something flickered across his face, interest, or recognition, or something I didn't have a name for. "Languages." "Yes." "Which ones?" "English, Italian, Spanish, a little Portuguese." He was quiet for a long moment. "That's a rare skill set," he said finally. "For a waitress." There was no judgment in it, just fact. The same way you might observe that the sky was blue or that water ran downhill. "Well," I said, because I'd learned to deflect attention with lightness. The linguistics career path isn't exactly booming. It could be. He looked away, back toward the street. For the right person. I left the check. I shouldn't have looked back, but I did. He was reading something on his phone, then something that made his jaw tighten, and in that moment I saw it. The crack in the stillness. It was brief, a flash of something sharp and dangerous, like watching a predator's pupils dilate right before it moves. My heart did a strange thing. It stumbled. When he left, he paid in cash. Left a $50 tip on a $90 meal. And as he walked toward the door, his phone rang. He answered it before the first ring finished, like he'd been waiting for it. "Si," he said. "Quando?" "Italian. But not the Italian of tourists or Italian Americans. The Italian of someone for whom it was blood and first language." I didn't hear the rest of the conversation. He was gone. But I felt it then, that small, hot prickle at the back of my neck. The sensation that something had just shifted in ways I didn't understand, that I'd been tagged, marked, noticed in a way that meant something. Marco emerged from the kitchen and began wiping down the counter. He didn't look at me, but his hands moved slower than usual. "You should not serve him again," he said. "What?" "If he comes back, tell Gia. Anyone but you." "Marco, what are you talking about?" He finally met my eyes, and in the reflected candlelight of Lucia's old mirrors, he looked afraid. "That man," he said quietly, "is not the type of person who notices things by accident. He noticed you, and now that he has..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Now you are inside his world whether you want to be or not." "That's insane," I said. But my hands were shaking as I wiped the table where he'd sat. Marco was wrong. He had to be. Except he wasn't. Because 3 nights later, when I was walking home through the rain-heavy streets of the North End, my usual route, down Salem Street toward my apartment, I saw him again. He was standing beneath an awning across the street, smoking a cigarette, watching me. And this time, I was certain. He was waiting. I didn't run. That was the first mistake, and I've thought about it 1,000 times since. If I'd run, maybe this wouldn't have happened. But my mother raised me to be polite, to face things directly, to not make a scene, so I stopped walking. I turned. I looked at him across the rain-soaked street as the city hummed its indifferent nighttime song around us. He dropped the cigarette and crossed toward me. Even now, knowing what I know, I can't properly explain the duality of that moment. The fear and the pull, existing simultaneously, like 2 currents in the same body of water. My survival instinct was screaming. Everything in me that was descended from people who understood danger recognized it in him. And yet there was something else, something that recognized him the way you recognize a song you've forgotten you loved. "I'm Dante Russo," he said when he reached me. No preamble, no apology for following me, just his name, offered like currency. "And you're going to tell me yours." "It's not a question," I heard myself say. "The way you phrased that." He smiled then. Just barely, a curve at the corner of his mouth. "You're observant. That's good." Good for what? For staying alive around me. The rain was heavier now, soaking through my work shirt. I should have been cold. Instead, I felt like I was burning. "I don't know what you want." "Yes, you do." He stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell him, expensive cologne mixed with cigarette smoke and something else, something like leather and gunpowder. "You want to know why I'm here? Why I followed you home? Why I can't stop thinking about the way you said, 'linguist,' at my table, like it was a secret you were ashamed of?" "I never said..." "No," he agreed. "You didn't say it. You lived it. Every time you served someone, you were translating not just their words, but what they meant." "The woman in the blue dress? She was lying to her husband about where she'd been." "The old couple? Married 40 years and still in love, which is the rarest fucking thing in this world." He paused. "And me? You sensed that something was wrong before your brain could catch up to it. There were footsteps nearby, someone walking past with a dog. Dante didn't even look away from me. "You're not safe," I said. The words came from somewhere deep, a place that knew things before I understood them. "Whatever this is, it's not safe." "No," he agreed. "It's not. But I'm not offering you safe. I'm offering you something else entirely." "What?" "Purpose, protection. The kind of life where you'd never have to serve another mediocre risotto to people who'll never remember your name." He reached out and tucked a strand of wet hair behind my ear. His hand was warm. Warm was the last thing I expected from him. "Come with me." "Come with you where?" "Away from here. From now. to somewhere you matter. I should have said no. I should have run. I should have done a lot of things that might have changed the trajectory of what happened next. But instead, I heard myself asking, why me? You've probably never seen me before that night. I've been watching this restaurant for 6 months, he said. Watching everyone who works there, everyone who eats there, trying to understand the intersection of people and power in that neighborhood. And then you walked out of the kitchen carrying risotto like it was a sacred thing, and I knew. I knew that you were different. Different how? Different like someone who sees the world in languages, in the space between what people say and what they mean. I have a problem, Bella, and I think you might be the only person in Boston who could solve it. What kind of problem? His expression hardened. The kind that gets people killed. The kind that involves an ancient oath written in Italian that no one in my family can fully translate because the language has shifted and the meaning has been lost. The kind that determines who lives and who dies in the world I inhabit. The world he inhabited. Not a metaphor. Not a joke. His words hung in the rain-soaked air between us like a confession. I couldn't say it, couldn't form the word. Yes, he said quietly. And now you know what I am. You have 3 choices. You can walk away, pretend this never happened, go back to your apartment and your small life. I won't stop you. I won't even follow. That's choice 1. And the others? Choice 2. You can go to the police. Tell them about the man who followed you, who said threatening things. They'll take a report. Nothing will happen because I'm very careful about what I say and how I say it. And then I'll disappear from your life forever, which will probably be better for you. That doesn't sound like a real choice, I said. It's not. Not really. He moved closer, and the rain fell between us like a veil. Choice 3 is that you come with me. You listen to what I have to say. You decide if you want to help me with this problem. And in exchange, you enter a world that you can't unsee, where the rules are different, where violence is sometimes just the language we speak. You could die in that world, Mia Cara. You should understand that. Why would you want someone like that in your life? Someone you'd have to protect? Because protection is the only thing I know how to do anymore. His eyes were darker now, and there was something fractured in them. Because the ancient oath my family swore 400 years ago is falling apart, and I have 12 men who would follow that oath to their deaths if they knew what it meant. And I have a feeling that you're the only person who could tell them. The only person who could translate not just the words, but the weight of them. I was shaking. Not from cold. From something else, something that felt like recognition, like fate, like the moment before you fall. If I say yes, I whispered. What happens then? Then, he said, and he took my face in both hands, with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone who looked like him. You become the most important person in a very dangerous man's life, and I become the reason you either survive or don't. He kissed me then, in the rain, on a street corner in the North End where anyone could have seen us, and it felt like crossing a border that I couldn't come back from. When he pulled away, he was smiling, not the small smile from the restaurant, a full, real smile that transformed his entire face. Come on, he said. I'll take you somewhere warm. I followed him to a car, a black Mercedes that appeared out of the darkness like a predator's purr, and I didn't look back at the apartment I'd called home for 3 years. I was stepping into his world. The moment the car door closed, I understood that I would never be ordinary again. The penthouse was in a building I'd never heard of. One of those places in Boston that old money built and new money couldn't buy into. 42 floors of black glass and marble that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The elevator climbed in silence. Dante stood beside me, his hand on the small of my back, and I could feel his heartbeat through that small point of contact. It was steady, unafraid. Mine was hammering like it wanted to escape. Before we go in, he said as we rose, you need to understand something. What you're about to see, I'm showing you this, because I want you to understand what I am, not what people say I am, what I actually am. And what's that? A man trying very hard not to destroy everything he touches. The elevator doors opened onto a hallway that led to a single door. He pulled out a key, a real key, not a card, and unlocked it. Everything about him was deliberately old-fashioned. I would learn that later. A rejection of modernness, of cameras and tracking systems, and the vulnerability they implied. The penthouse was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Floor-to-ceiling windows showing the entire city stretched below us like a circuit board of light. A library that went 2 stories high. Leather-bound books that looked like they'd never been read but had been very carefully chosen. Furniture that didn't match but somehow worked modern minimalism next to antique pieces. like different eras living in the same space, and on a marble desk in the center of the study, illuminated by a single pool of lamplight, lay an ancient book. "That's what brought you here," Dante said. "Not me, that." I approached it slowly. The leather was so old it was nearly black, cracked like aged skin. The pages were parchment, and the handwriting was beautiful, that medieval Italian script that seems to exist between calligraphy and art. And at the bottom of each page, repeated in a border that formed almost a prayer, was a phrase I could read, but didn't fully understand. "Non si può tradire il sangue. Il sangue è la legge. La legge è la morte." Blood cannot be betrayed, I translated slowly. Blood is the law is death? I looked up at him. It's not exactly death. It's more like ending or termination, but in a very specific way. Like a final judgment. Keep reading. I turned more pages. The text was dense, written in a kind of poetic Italian that had archaic elements I had to parse carefully. It told a story of family, generations back, making an oath, binding themselves to each other, not just through blood but through a covenant that sounded almost religious. The language was soaked in symbolism, the soil of Naples, the sea that surrounded them, the church that both blessed and condemned them. "This is beautiful," I heard myself say. I paused, looking for the right word. "This is profound." Whoever wrote this understood something about belonging, about the weight of choosing a family over everything else. "Read the last page." I did. And my breath caught. The final entry was dated 400 years ago, and it wasn't in the same hand as the rest. It was rough, hurried, written in what looked like actual blood. The ink or whatever fluid had been used had turned a dark brown, and the handwriting was shaking. "Tradito da colui che amai più della mia anima. Il sangue ricide il sangue. La legge è stata rotta. Adesso, la morte è la sola via." Betrayed by the one I loved more than my soul. Blood demands blood. The law is broken. Now, death is the only path. "Someone broke the oath," I whispered. "Someone broke it," Dante confirmed. And the repercussion was written into the family law from that moment forward. Blood debt. Eternal. Passed down through generations. Every man in my family grows up knowing that somewhere in our past, a betrayal happened that can never be forgiven, only managed. What does that mean, managed? It means that my grandfather killed the line of the man who broke the oath. 3 men, the traitor, his son, his grandson. He killed them not in war, but in peace. Executed them like a judgment. Dante moved to the window. The city lights caught in his eyes and made them look like burning coals. And that act, that violent maintenance of the oath, became the foundation of everything our family does. We are not businessmen. We are executioners of ancient law. I closed the book carefully. My hands were shaking. Why tell me this? Because I need to know if you can handle who I am. Not just that I'm dangerous. That the danger is written into my bones at the cellular level. That there are men in this city who would kill you if they thought it would weaken me. That I have blood on my hands from choices I made long before I knew you existed. And I'll have more blood on them before this is over. He turned to face me, and in the lamplight, his scar stood out like a white line of division. "I want you to stay. But you need to know what staying means. It means that your life becomes currency in a world where people trade in human suffering. It means that I will protect you, but that protection comes at a cost. It means..." He never finished. There was a sound from the other room. A crash, loud and violent. Dante moved faster than I'd ever seen a human, move a gun suddenly in his hand, his entire body shifting into something predatory and coiled. "Stay," he said, and his voice had changed, had become that low, dangerous thing I'd heard briefly at the restaurant. He moved toward the sound, and I heard him say something sharp in Italian. Rapid fire, urgent. And then a man emerged from the darkness of the hall. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and a suit that was torn. His face was bleeding. "Capo," the man gasped. "They found us. The Colombos. They found the safe house. He collapsed against the doorframe, and only then did I see the blood spreading across his shirt. Dante caught him, held him upright with a strength that seemed impossible. "Matteo," Dante said, and there was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Devastation. "Matteo, stay with me." It was a setup, Matteo wheezed. Someone inside, someone from our own, told them. The Oathbreaker. Capo. It's happening again. Just like the old stories. The betrayal. "Don't," Dante said sharply. Don't talk. Don't use your air. I'm calling a doctor. But I could see it. I could see the moment Matteo understood that there was no doctor coming. Not in time. His eyes went distant. Amore mio, he said, looking past Dante to a small photograph on the desk, a woman, smiling. I'm sorry. I couldn't keep the oath. You kept it, Dante said, and I watched him cry. Not dramatically, not with sound, just tears running down his face while his body remained perfectly, unnaturally still. You kept it better than anyone. Matteo died in his arms. I didn't look away. I didn't run. I watched Dante hold a dead man while the city lights continued their indifferent march across the floor of the penthouse, and I understood then what he'd been trying to tell me. This was his world. Not glamorous, not romantic, just a series of losses stacked on top of each other until you became so heavy you could barely move. He laid Matteo on the floor gently and stood, and when he looked at me, his eyes were empty. You can leave now, he said. No judgment, no consequences, just go. I thought about it. For a full 10 seconds, I thought about walking toward the elevator, pressing the button, descending into the world where people like Matteo died in their lovers' arms while you served them risotto. Instead, I walked to Dante, and very slowly, I took his blood-covered hand in mine. Tell me what you need me to do, I said. He looked down at our hands like they belonged to someone else, and then he pulled me toward him and held me so tightly I couldn't breathe. In that moment, he stopped being a crime boss. He became something smaller and more human, a man who had just lost someone, who needed to know that at least one person in this world wouldn't disappear. I need you to help me translate, he said into my hair. I need you to help me understand who broke the oath, because if Matteo was right, if someone inside my family is feeding information to the Colombos, then it's not just information. It's a challenge. It's the ancient betrayal happening all over again. He pulled back and looked at me. And I need you to do it while we're at war. The penthouse transformed overnight into a war room. Men began arriving, 8 of them, all with the same quality of controlled violence that Dante carried. They appeared in the study while I was still in the library's upper level, translating passages from the ancient oath with a frantic precision I didn't know I possessed. The adrenaline in my system had become my new baseline. Sleep felt like a luxury for the living. I've tried to reconstruct those first days chronologically, but they blur together like watercolors in rain. Dante moved between planning sessions and phone calls and violence that happened in rooms I wasn't allowed to enter. I could hear the low murmur of his voice, sometimes tense, sometimes patient, sometimes utterly cold. I learned his tones the way you learn a language without meaning to. The word Colombo started to mean something. A rival family, older than Dante's lineage, based out of South Boston but with fingers in everything from the docks to the courthouse. They'd been circling Dante's territory for months, probing for weaknesses. And now, with someone feeding them information from inside the organization, they were closing in. The leak, Dante said on the second evening, showing me a photograph of 6 men around a table, has to be one of these. Men who know about Matteo. Men who knew where he was. What happens when you find out who? He didn't answer. We both knew. I was sitting at the marble desk in the study, my laptop open to cross-reference translation websites, a legal pad covered in notes, and half-formed theories about the oath's structure. The ancient book was open to a section I'd been studying for hours, a passage that detailed the punishment for breaking the covenant. There's something you're missing, I said, looking up at him. He was standing at the window, watching the city like it was a chessboard, and he was calculating moves. It was almost midnight, and he hadn't slept in maybe 36 hours. He still looked perfect, hair immaculate, suit unwrinkled, but there was something wearing thin behind his eyes. Show me, he said. I pulled the book toward me and pointed to a specific passage. The oath is written in layers. The surface level, the covenant, the blood promise, the law, that's what everyone has been focusing on. But there's a secondary language underneath. Look at the first letter of every third sentence in this section. Dante came around the desk and leaned over, his body close enough that I could feel his warmth. He smelled like espresso and cigarettes and something darker that I was beginning to recognize as violence. It spells something, I said quietly. A name. Or part of one. Marcello. Marcello. Is that Marcello Russo? He said, and his voice had become that dangerous thing again. My uncle, my father's brother. He died when I was 20. How did he die? Dante was very still. He was executed. For treason. For selling information about family operations to the Colombos. And the punishment. I flipped through the pages. searching for the section detailing the consequences of betrayal. The oath states that the traitor's entire line must be eliminated, not just the man himself, the family, the blood. I know, Dante said quietly. So you killed? My grandfather killed Marcello, and Marcello's son, and Marcello's son's daughter, my cousin. He moved away from me, back to the window. He was very thorough about maintaining the law. I understood then, in a way I hadn't before, what the weight of that ancient oath actually meant. It wasn't poetry or symbolism. It was permission. It was the word of God, written 400 years ago and affirmed in blood, that said this is the price of betrayal. And the price was measured not in an individual's life but in the erasure of an entire bloodline. If someone is breaking the oath again, I said carefully, who would you? Don't ask me that. I have to. If I'm going to help you, I need to understand the rules of this world. He turned to face me, and his expression was something between pain and rage. The rules are that we protect our own above everything else. That loyalty is the only currency that matters. That betrayal is answered with death. And if that death requires killing someone you love, his voice cracked slightly, then you kill them, and you carry it until you die. Did you kill your cousin? No, my father did. The confession hung in the air between us like a wound. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked. Because I'm tired of lying about who I am. Because... He stopped, and when he continued, his voice was barely a whisper. Because I'm afraid that if I don't tell you the truth, you'll leave when you realize it. And I don't think I can survive that after Matteo. I stood and walked to him. The penthouse suddenly felt very small, just us and the city and the ancient weight of family law pressing down from above. I reached out and touched his face, my palm against his scar, and felt him tremble. I'm not going to leave, I said. You will. Everyone does eventually. Not me. He kissed me then, with a desperation that felt like drowning, and I understood that this was what he'd been afraid of from the beginning. Not that I'd judge him, but that I'd judge him and stay anyway, which was somehow worse than if I'd just run. My phone rang. It was Gia from the restaurant, her voice high and panicked. Non, you need to come back. Like, right now. There are men here looking for you. They said they know where you went, that you're with Dante Russo. They said to tell you that the Colombos are... I hung up. The restaurant, I said. They found the restaurant. Dante was already moving. Already calling out orders to the men in the other rooms. His business mode. His ruthless mode. The part of him that wasn't capable of kindness or doubt. Secure my location, he said into his phone. Move 3 men to North End. Lucia's on Salem Street. Anyone asking about the waitress, anyone gets a message, tell them she's under the Russo family protection. Anyone who touches her, we're burning down their operation. He hung up and looked at me. You're safe now, he said. Anyone who tries to use you against me dies. You understand that? That's the law. That's how we survive in this world. I nodded, even though I didn't understand. Even though a part of me recognized that he'd just declared war on his rivals to protect me. That I'd just become not a person but a possession, a weakness, the leverage that could destroy him. Is that good? I asked. Or bad? Neither, he said. It's the only option we have left. The next morning, Dante took me to a different location, a brownstone in Brookline, old and beautiful, with curtains drawn and a security system that he entered with the ease of someone who'd been planning his escape routes for years. There were 3 guards now, stationed at different points on the property. They didn't acknowledge me when I arrived. I was just another detail of protection. I spent that day translating frantically, searching through the ancient oath for any mention of how to identify a traitor, how to prove the betrayal, what evidence would hold up under the terrible law that governed Dante's world. The book was becoming less like a historical document and more like a weapon. It was the ammunition we'd use to justify whatever came next. Around midnight, Dante found me still working in the study. You should sleep, he said. So should you. He smiled sadly. I don't sleep anymore. Haven't since I was 20, and my father made me watch while he executed my cousin. It's hard to sleep after something like that. I closed the book and looked at him. Are you going to tell me who the traitor is? When I know for certain, yes. Until then, he paused. I'm going to protect you, and I'm going to do what needs to be done. Those are the only 2 promises I can make. I understood. This was the bargain I'd made when I took his hand in the penthouse. I'd chosen this world, and now this world was closing around me like a fist. The brownstone had a bedroom on the 2nd floor with a view of the street below. I watched the guards from the window, men in dark coats. patient as stones, their eyes tracking every passing car. This was what protection looked like in Dante's world. Not comfort, surveillance. On the 4th day of our confinement, the electricity in the city shifted. I didn't understand it at first. Just that when Dante emerged from the secure phone calls he took in the basement, his face had changed. The careful control he maintained had cracked slightly, exposing something raw underneath. He found me in the study and closed the door with deliberate quiet. "We found the leak," he said. I didn't ask him how, or what proof they'd uncovered. I was beginning to understand that some knowledge was dangerous to have. "Who?" I asked instead. "Vittorio Salerno, senior member of the family. Been with us since my father's time." The name meant nothing to me, but the way Dante said it meant everything. The weight of it, the history. "What are you going to do?" "What I have to do." He turned to leave, and I grabbed his wrist. It was reflex, or instinct, or something that transcended rationality. "Don't go," I said. He looked down at where I was touching him, then back up at my face. "I have to." "Then take me with you." "Absolutely not. You said the oath demands blood for betrayal. Blood is answered with blood. But it also says," I turned to the book, flipping through pages with a precision that had become muscle memory. "Here, the judgment must be witnessed by those bound to the covenant, lest the law become tyranny. You can't just execute him alone. The family needs to see it. They need to understand why. This is not a game, Bella. This is not a place for women? For someone who isn't made of stone?" I stood, and I was close enough to see the moment his resolve wavered. "I'm the only one in your organization who can truly translate the oath. I'm the only one who can explain to your family why Vittorio's death is required by something older than any of us. Take me. Let me make him understand what he did. Let me give his betrayal a context instead of just a body. You're asking me to take you to a murder. I'm asking you to let me be part of your world. The real world. Not this protected space where I watch from the window while you bleed out your problems." He studied me for a long moment. And then, slowly, he nodded. The warehouse was on the water. I remember that because I could smell the salt and the rot of old industrial decay. The floor was concrete, pristine, which seemed wrong for what we were there to do. 3 of his men brought Vittorio in through a side door. He was blindfolded, and his hands were bound. And when he saw Dante, and then saw me, his expression shifted through confusion into understanding, and finally into something that looked almost like relief. "The oath," he said, his voice rough. "You brought her for the oath. She's here because she's going to read the charges against you," Dante said. "Because her word carries weight that no Italian but an ancient Italian carries. And because when you die, you'll die knowing exactly why." Vittorio laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass. "You think I don't know why? You think I've been working with the Colombos for 5 years without understanding what I was doing?" Dante said nothing. His face had become a mask. "I did it because I was tired," Vittorio continued. "Tired of the oath, tired of the blood, tired of being bound to something written by men 400 years dead. Your father, God rest him, he was willing to kill his own niece to keep this machine running, and you're willing to do the same. So yes, I told the Colombos where Matteo was. Yes, I told them about your supply routes and your contacts at the courthouse. I did it because someone needed to break this cycle of violence. You broke faith," I heard myself say. Both men looked at me. I walked toward Vittorio, the ancient book heavy in my hands. "You understood the oath when you swore it. You understood what you were agreeing to, and then you violated it because the cost felt too high. But the cost was always this high. You just didn't want to pay it anymore. You're a child," Vittorio said, not unkindly. "I'm a translator, and I'm telling you that the oath you broke says your blood pays for your betrayal. Not because your family is cruel, because betrayal destroys everything it touches. Matteo is dead because of you. How many other men will die because you wanted out? So Dante should kill me? Is that what you're saying?" I looked back at Dante, and I saw it then, the impossible thing he was dealing with. The way justice and violence lived in the same body, the way love and death were indistinguishable in his world. "I'm saying that the oath demands a price," I said quietly, "and the only way to keep your family together is to pay it." Vittorio turned his gaze back to Dante. "Do it then. Get it over with." But Dante wasn't looking at Vittorio anymore. He was looking at me. And I watched him understand something about the cost of asking me to be here. The way it would change me. The way I would become, in some essential way, an accomplice. "I can't," he said. "Sir," one of the men started. But Dante held up a hand. I can't do this with her here. He turned away and walked out of the warehouse. Just left, Vittorio blindfolded and bound on the concrete floor, and me standing there with the ancient book and the weight of a covenant that demanded blood pressing down from above. One of the guards looked at me expectantly. "No," I said. "Don't. Whatever you were about to do, don't." We stood there in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. And then Dante returned with a car, and he told the men to take Vittorio to a place where he could leave Boston forever, to send him away but not to kill him. "He'll talk," the men protested. "He'll tell people about us." "I don't care," Dante said, and he sounded exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Let him talk. Let him tell his story about a family so broken we could barely remember what we were supposed to be protecting." He took my hand and led me back to the car. In the car, driving back toward the brownstone, Dante's hands shook on the steering wheel. Not from fear, from something deeper. The trembling of someone who'd just stepped away from an edge and realized how close he'd been to falling. "The oath demanded his death," he said quietly. "Yes, you were right about that. The law is clear. The betrayal requires blood," I finished. "I know, but I couldn't do it. Not with you there. Not while you were watching and understanding exactly what it would mean." He pulled the car over suddenly, onto a quiet street in Jamaica Plain. "Do you understand what you've done to me? How you've changed me?" "I made you human," I said. "You made me weak." "No. You chose not to become him." I gestured vaguely back toward the warehouse, toward the weight of everything his family had done in the name of law. "You chose something else. And what happens when my family finds out that I let the oathbreaker live? What happens when they decide I'm the new traitor?" I didn't have an answer to that. We sat in the dark car while the city moved around us, indifferent and enormous. "Come here," he said finally. I did. He pulled me across the center console and held me the way he had in the penthouse after Matteo died, with a desperation that was almost violent, and I understood that I'd become something different to him. Not a person to protect. A person who was protecting him from the worst part of himself. His lips found my neck, and he stayed there, breathing me in like I was oxygen, like I was the only thing keeping him anchored to the world. "I'm terrified," he whispered against my skin. "I'm terrified of what I'm willing to do for you. I'm terrified of what you've made me become." "You're not a different person," I said, my hands threading through his hair. "You're just a version of yourself without the armor. And that's beautiful." "That's not beautiful. That's weakness." "Then I love your weakness," I said, and the words left before I could stop them. Before I understood what they meant, he pulled back and looked at me, and his expression shifted through confusion into something desperate and raw. "Don't say that. You can't." "Why not?" "Because I'll destroy you. Because the world I come from will destroy you. Because I'm going to have to kill people to keep you safe. And every death will be because of you. And you'll know that, and it will haunt you." "I already know that," I said. "And it won't haunt me, because you'll be haunted enough for both of us." He kissed me then with a kind of violence that was completely different from the violence I'd witnessed in the warehouse. This was the violence of need, of a man drowning and clinging to the only thing that could save him. It was terrifying and intoxicating in equal measure. And I knew, in that moment, that I'd crossed another border, that I was no longer observing his world but truly inhabiting it. The brownstone began to feel less like a safe house and more like a confession box. Dante stopped leaving for extended periods. Instead, he'd spend hours in the study with me, drinking espresso that never seemed to cool, talking about things I don't think he'd ever meant to say aloud. Stories from his childhood, the weight of knowing from age 10 that his family ran the North End, the image of his cousin's face, the moment his father pulled the trigger, burned into memory in a way that 20 years of distance couldn't erase. On the 6th night, he brought me to a room I hadn't seen before. It was in the basement of the brownstone, behind a wall that opened with a code only he knew. Inside was something like a shrine, photographs of men covering every surface. I recognized some of them from business dealings, men who'd been executed, or who'd killed themselves, or who'd simply disappeared. Their faces stared out from the walls like ghosts demanding attention. "This is what I've done," Dante said quietly. "Every man I've killed, every order I've given that resulted in death. I keep their pictures because I don't want to forget. I don't want to become someone who kills without remembering who he's killing." I moved closer to one of the photographs. A man in his 50s, kind eyes, a wedding ring visible on his left hand. Who was he? Someone who was supposed to be loyal but talked to the wrong person. I had him killed 6 years ago. "Do you regret it?" "Every day of my life." I turned to look at him, and I saw it then, the real weight of his existence. The way he carried every death like a stone in his chest. This wasn't someone who killed because he enjoyed it. This was someone who killed because the law of his family demanded it, and he'd internalized that law so completely that he couldn't distinguish between his own will and its requirements. "You don't have to be this," I said. "You could leave. You could walk away, and let someone else run the organization. Someone who would probably kill you just to ensure you don't become a liability." He shook his head. "No. I stay because if I don't, the violence gets worse. More chaotic, less contained. There's a logic to how I run things. Men understand the rules. They know where the lines are. And where's the line for me?" He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're not a line. You're the space outside all the lines. You're the only thing I've encountered in my entire adult life that exists outside the law. That's not safe." "I know." He pulled me toward him, and we descended into the basement deeper, past the photographs toward the back wall. There was a painting there, something old, maybe Renaissance, a Madonna with a child. The kind of religious art that Italian families kept like a talisman against the violence they committed in secret. "My mother gave me that," he said. "Before she died, she told me that she knew what I would become, that she'd seen it written into my bones from the moment I was born, and she made me promise that I wouldn't lose myself completely, that I'd remember there was something divine in me, even if the rest of the world couldn't see it. Do you remember?" "No, not until you." He kissed me then, with a tenderness that felt almost sacred. His hands moved across my body like he was trying to memorize my shape, like he was afraid I might disappear, and I understood that this was what I'd been brought into his world, to provide not a solution to his problems, but a witness to his humanity. A person who could see the parts of him that he couldn't see anymore. We made love on a couch in that basement, surrounded by photographs of the dead. It wasn't erotic. It was something deeper and more essential, a kind of prayer offered to a God he no longer believed in. His body was marked with scars I'd never noticed before. A gunshot wound on his shoulder, a burn that had healed badly on his ribs, a knife wound that had come dangerously close to his heart. Each scar had a story. Each story was a death he'd caused, or a death he'd escaped. "Does it frighten you?" he asked afterward, his fingers tracing patterns across my skin in the darkness. "Seeing what I am? No," I said, and it was true. The man I was with in that basement was no longer frightening because I understood him. Fear requires distance, and I'd eliminated every distance between us. The call came while we were still in the basement. One of the guards brought Dante his phone, with an urgency that indicated something had shifted. He took the call, and I watched his expression calcify. "When?" he said. Whatever the answer was, it changed something. "I'm coming back. Secure the location. No one gets inside without my explicit approval." He hung up and looked at me. "We need to go." "What happened?" "My father. He's in the hospital. Someone shot him outside his home. The hospital was private. The kind of place where money ensured that certain patients never appeared in official records. Dante moved through it like a ghost, his presence causing people to step aside and avert their eyes. There was a corridor on the 3rd floor, where his men had stationed themselves, 4 of them, looking dangerous in their dark suits, their eyes tracking every movement. His father lay in a bed that looked too small for him. Even diminished by age and blood loss, he was an enormous presence. His eyes opened when Dante entered, and something like pain crossed his face. Not physical pain, disappointment. "You let him live," his father said. His voice was paper-thin, fragile as something blown in the wind. "Yes," Dante said simply. "Then you are not the man I raised you to be." "I know. The oath demands." "I know what it demands, Papa. I've always known." Dante pulled a chair close to the bed and sat. "I chose to break it." His father tried to move, a gesture that caused him to wince with pain. "The family will tear itself apart. If you show weakness, if you let the oath be questioned, then maybe it deserves to be torn apart," Dante said, and there was no anger in his voice, just weariness. "Maybe an oath written in blood 400 years ago shouldn't be the law anymore. Maybe we've paid enough. You cannot change what we are." "No," Dante agreed. "But maybe I can change what we become." He took his father's hand, and I watched an old man grapple with the realization that his son had become something he couldn't control, something that transcended the law he'd spent his entire life protecting. "Who shot you?" Dante asked. "The Colombos, or people working for them. I don't know anymore. There are too many enemies to keep track of. That's going to change. Starting tomorrow, I'm making peace overtures. Real ones. I'm going to ask for a meeting with their leadership, and I'm going to propose something new. An alliance. A division of territory that doesn't require bodies. His father's eyes widened. You can't. I can. And I am. Because I'm tired, Papa. I'm tired in a way that doesn't sleep anymore. And I think maybe you're tired too. His father closed his eyes, and I watched him age another decade in that moment. The weight of an ancient oath finally becoming too heavy to hold. The agreement came 3 weeks later. I'd spent that time translating every section of the ancient oath, working with Dante to create a document that recontextualized the family law in terms that modern sensibilities could understand. The oath wasn't evil, it was a survival mechanism created by men who lived in a world where betrayal meant death. By understanding its origins, by contextualizing it, we could begin to change what it meant, or so we thought. Vittorio's reappearance in Boston was the first sign that we'd miscalculated. He came to the Colombo family and offered them everything he knew about Dante's operations in exchange for protection. But more than that, he offered them a narrative. He told them that Dante had broken the ancient oath, that he'd shown weakness, that he was negotiating with them because he no longer had the strength to fight. It was true. And it was poison. And it worked exactly as intended. The shooting started on a Friday. We were at a restaurant neutral ground, where the preliminary peace talks were supposed to happen. Just Dante and me and 2 of his security detail. The Colombo representatives hadn't arrived yet. We were waiting, and I was nervous in a way that felt prescient. Dante's phone rang. He took the call, listened to something, and his entire body went still in a way I'd learned to recognize. It meant someone had died. How many? He asked quietly. I couldn't hear the answer, but I could read it in the way he closed his eyes. Protect their families, he said. Money, relocation, whatever they need. They died for me. I won't abandon them. He hung up and looked at me. 3 of my men were killed. Ambush at a warehouse in Revere. The Colombos are saying it wasn't them, that it was independent operators working for Vittorio, that the peace talks are impossible now, so they can blame you for the violence. I said. They can say you started it. Yes. What are you going to do? He stood. The men who'd been standing at discreet distances suddenly materialized, reading the shift in his energy, the way animals read atmospheric pressure before a storm. I'm going to declare war. The words hung in the air like a curse. That's what Vittorio wants, I said. That's exactly. I don't care what Vittorio wants. 3 men are dead because I tried to be merciful. 3 women are widows because I wanted to break an ancient law. This is the price of my weakness, and I'm not paying it anymore. He moved toward the door, but I grabbed his arm. The guards tensed, hands moving toward weapons, but Dante raised a hand to stop them. You can't, I said. You can't go back to this. I won't let you. You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. I can leave. I can walk away from this right now, and never look back. Something flickered across his face. Pain, grief. The recognition that his world was closing in again, tightening its grip. Then go, he said. Leave. Protect yourself. You don't want me to leave. No, he admitted. I want you to stay. I want you to stay and keep me human while I do something inhuman. But I won't ask you to do that. The choice is yours. I was crying, I realized. Tears running down my face without me noticing they'd started. The oath, I said. The ancient oath. The last section I've been avoiding, translating it because I know what it says. But it's there. It's been there the entire time. Do you want to know what it says? Yes. It says that the family law can only be broken by choice. That blood cannot demand blood if there's no one willing to shed it. That the oath is only as powerful as the belief of the people who swear it. I pulled out my phone and showed him the translation I'd been working on in secret. The words that could burn down everything or save it, depending on how you chose to interpret them. The law lives only in the hearts of those who accept it. If you reject it, it dies with you. This is the final truth hidden in the ancient words. Not that blood binds forever, but that blood only binds if you choose to let it. You mean, he said slowly, that if I decide the oath doesn't apply anymore, then it doesn't? Yes, but only for you. Only if you're willing to be the one who breaks it. Willingly, completely, and accept the consequences. The consequences are everyone finding out that the Russo family no longer follows the law. Everyone will challenge us. Everyone will move against us. Yes. He was quiet for a very long time, and then he began to laugh, not with humor, with the exhaustion of someone who'd finally understood that he'd been given a choice between two kinds of death, and he was choosing the one that might actually lead to living. "Okay," he said. "We don't go to war. We don't execute the people who betrayed us. We let the Colombos think they've won, and we dismantle the organization from within. We offer every man a choice: stay and accept that the oath is dead, or leave with enough money to disappear. That will destroy everything you've built." "Yes, and maybe that's what needs to happen." He pulled me close and kissed the top of my head. "I'm sorry I brought you into this. I'm sorry I showed you the worst parts of myself. Don't be. I needed to see all of you." The war, he declared, never happened. Instead, he did something more devastating. He called every member of his organization to the warehouse where Vittorio had been bound, and standing in front of them with me beside him, he announced that the Russo family was dissolving, not being taken over, not being restructured, being ended. "The ancient oath is dead," he said. "I am ending it, and in ending it, I am freeing you. Every one of you has served this family with blood and sacrifice, and you are owed better than that. You're owed lives that exist outside of violence, outside of the law written in the language of death." The men looked at each other, confused, angry, terrified. They'd been raised in this world the same way he had. The oath wasn't just a law, it was an identity. "What about the Colombos?" one of them asked. "What about the families who've sworn to kill us?" "That's on me," Dante said. "I'm going to meet with them, and I'm going to offer them something they've never wanted more than war. Peace. And the reason I can offer them true peace is because I'm no longer bound by the law that said every conflict must be resolved in blood." He looked at me then, and I understood that everything I'd done, every translation, every choice, every moment I'd stood with him in that basement, had been leading to this, to the moment where he could be free. The Colombo family didn't believe him. They thought the peace overture was a trap, a final play by a desperate man. So they attacked. They killed 2 of his remaining men outside his apartment building. They burned the warehouse where his operations had been based. They put a bounty on his head that attracted every mercenary and crime family from the Northeast. And Dante responded not with violence, but with surrender. He walked into a Colombo safe house alone, unarmed, and he sat across from their leadership and offered them everything. Information about every operation, every contact, every dollar. In exchange, they let him disappear. The meeting lasted 8 hours. I waited in a hotel room 12 blocks away, not knowing if he would return, not knowing if the violence I'd helped him escape would finally catch up with him. I had the ancient book with me, and I sat on the bed translating passages I'd already translated 100 times, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold a pen. When he finally appeared in the doorway, he was bleeding, not from bullets, from knives. There were cuts across his face, his neck, his arms. The Colombos had decided that letting him walk away wasn't enough. They needed him to carry the mark of his surrender visibly. I ran to him and held him up as he moved toward the bathroom, and I could feel the trembling in his body that had nothing to do with physical pain. He'd crossed another line. He'd chosen vulnerability over strength in a world where vulnerability was fatal. "It's done," he said, his voice hoarse from something screaming or crying or both. "I told them everything. Our roots, our suppliers, our corrupted politicians. Everything we built is going to become theirs." "And what about us?" I asked, helping him into the shower, watching the water run red with his blood. "We disappear. You and me. I have enough money hidden away that they'll never find. Enough to live quietly, away from all of this. And your family? Your father? I've made arrangements. He'll be protected. My betrayal of the oath is my own, not theirs. They can either continue the old ways or create new ones. I don't get to decide that anymore." I helped him clean the wounds. Some of them were deep, would probably scar. I realized that I was becoming desensitized to his suffering. It was just another thing that happened in this world we inhabited. Just another mark that violence left on people who tried to fight against it. That night, I didn't ask him if he regretted his choice. I knew he did. I could see it in the way he moved with less confidence. Like shedding the oath had also shed his certainty about who he was. But I also knew that the alternative, staying in that world, protecting the law, becoming harder and colder until there was nothing human left, would have been a slower death. We had nothing now. No power, no protection, no future that any intelligent person would want. But we had each other, and we had the choice to keep it that way. It would have to be enough. The safe house in Vermont was small, quiet, surrounded by woods that seemed to absorb sound. I'd never known silence like that before, not the tense silence of the brownstone, where every sound meant danger, but the kind of silence that came from being genuinely removed from the world. We stayed there for 6 months. During the day, Dante would sit on the porch and watch the woods, and I could see him struggling with his new identity, or lack thereof. He'd been defined by power for so long that having none was like losing a limb. He moved through the small house like a ghost, helpful with mundane tasks but fundamentally absent from the present moment. I tried to reach him. I cooked meals he didn't taste. I read to him from books he didn't absorb. I lay beside him at night and felt the tension in his body like a rope pulled too tight. One evening, about 4 months in, he finally broke. "I need to go back," he said. We were sitting outside, watching the autumn colors turn the woods into fire. It was the kind of moment that should have been peaceful, but his words poisoned the air between us. "No, you don't," I said, though I knew he was right. "My father is dying. Actually dying. Not just the dying he's been doing his whole life. And I'm here pretending to be someone I'm not. You're safe here. I don't want to be safe. I want to be myself." He turned to look at me, and his expression was devastating. And myself exists in that world. I tried to escape it, but I can't. Escaping the oath isn't the same as escaping who I am. So what does that mean, for us? It means I have to go back. I have to be there for my father's last days. I have to see if the family can survive without the ancient law, or if they're going to destroy themselves fighting over power. I have to, he stopped, searching for words. I have to stop running. If you go back, the Colombos will kill you. You gave them everything. You're a liability now. Maybe. Or maybe my usefulness has earned me a reprieve. Maybe they'll let me have this one thing to be with my family while my father dies. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that going back was suicide. That he was throwing away the life we'd built together. That love wasn't supposed to hurt like this. But I knew that he couldn't actually live as whoever he was trying to be. Some people are too rooted in their origins to ever fully escape them. "Take me with you," I said. "I can't protect you there. I don't need protection. I need you." He pulled me toward him and kissed me, and I tasted salt and regret, and the terrible knowledge that this was beginning of an ending. We went back to Boston on a cold morning in late October. Dante met with the Colombos first, alone, to negotiate his brief reprieve. I waited in the car, my hands in my lap, the ancient book beside me. I'd kept it through everything, through the warehouse, through Vermont, through all the moments where holding onto it felt like holding onto a ghost. When he returned, he was pale but alive. 3 weeks, he said. "They're giving me 3 weeks to be with my family. After that, I'm supposed to disappear permanently. Leave the country. Never contact anyone in Boston again. And you're going to do that?" "Yes, because the alternative is being executed in a way that sends a message to everyone else about what happens when you betray the Colombo family." We drove to the hospital in silence. His father was in a private room that overlooked the entire city. Even dying, he commanded the space through sheer presence. When he saw Dante, his eyes filled with tears. "Mio figlio," he said. "My son." I waited in the hallway while they talked. I could hear the low murmur of Dante's voice, and occasionally his father's rougher, more fragmented, like speech was becoming difficult. They were saying goodbye in the way that only family can, with all the things left unsaid, and all the ways they'd failed each other understood but not spoken aloud. When Dante emerged, he was red-eyed. "He's proud of me," he said, and the way he said it made it clear that this was the last thing he'd expected to hear. He said I did the impossible. I made a choice that was neither law nor chaos, and I survived it. He said he wishes he'd had the strength to do the same. "Did you tell him you have to leave?" "Yes, he understands. He's already made arrangements for the family to transition. Those who want to continue old ways can break away and form their own organization. Those who want something different can create something new. Either way, the Russo family as it was will cease to exist." His father died 3 days later, with both of us at his bedside, and I watched Dante cry in a way that had nothing to do with guilt or power or the ancient oath. He cried like a son, like someone who'd finally made peace with the man who raised him, only to have that peace immediately followed by loss. The last week in Boston was stolen time. Dante moved through his remaining obligations, meeting with family members, overseeing the dissolution of operations, transferring assets to people he trusted. I stayed near him, not interfering but present, a witness to the end of an era. On the 7th day, we returned to the brownstone in Brookline. It felt different now, emptier, Or perhaps just honest in a way it hadn't been before. All the photographs of the dead still covered the basement walls, but they seemed less like accusations and more like the natural consequence of living in a world built on violence. We made love there, in that basement shrine. And it was the most tender thing we'd done together. Not passion, not desperation. Just two people acknowledging that they'd chosen each other, despite knowing exactly what that choice would cost. Afterward, lying in the darkness, he told me the rest of his plan. "I'm not actually leaving Boston," he said. "I'm leaving the country in 3 weeks, going to Argentina, like I told the Colombos. But you're staying." "Absolutely not. Listen. In 6 months, when the dust has settled and everyone believes I'm gone for good, you're going to contact me. And then you're going to join me. The Colombos are watching for threats, not for a woman with dual citizenship and no known connection to the Russo family. That's 6 months of separation. I know. But it keeps you safe while I disappear. And it gives the Colombos time to believe they've actually won, that they've actually eliminated the threat. And after I get to Argentina, what then? Then we figure out who we are when we're not running from the past. Maybe we stay in Argentina. Maybe we move somewhere else. Maybe we have the kind of life that normal people have, where the worst thing that happens is someone messes up your coffee order." I smiled despite myself. "I think I'd like that. I know you would. That's why I'm doing this." He pulled me closer. The oath demanded blood. It demanded that I become a man who could kill without flinching, and I did become that man. But you showed me that I could become something else instead, that there was another way to interpret the ancient law. I didn't show you anything you didn't already know. Yes, you did. You showed me that love could be stronger than law, that choosing someone could matter more than maintaining power. You showed me that I had a choice. And what are you choosing now? You, he said. Always you. Even if it means becoming someone nobody recognizes. Even if it means starting over without any of the things that made me who I was. The night before he left, we went to Lucia's. Marco was still there, older perhaps, or maybe just worn down by time. He didn't seem surprised to see me, or perhaps he'd expected this ending all along. He seated us in the corner booth, the one with a view of both doors, and he served us himself. You lived, he said to me in Italian, quietly, so no one else could hear. Yes, I said, but just barely. That's all any of us can do in this city. Dante ordered risotto and veal, the same meal from months ago when none of this had begun. And as we ate, I realized that every moment of this had been inevitable. From the first moment, I sensed something wrong about him. Every choice had been leading to this, to him leaving, to me staying, to the promise of a reunion that might not happen, because the world was too chaotic to promise anything. But we tried anyway. Because that's what you do when someone shows you a version of yourself you didn't know was possible. He left on a Tuesday morning. We said goodbye at the airport, and he held me like he was trying to memorize my shape, my weight, the exact sound of my breathing. Other people walked around us, tourists and business people and people heading somewhere they thought mattered, but we existed in our own small world, indifferent to the city moving around us. I'll contact you in 6 months, he said. Not before, not under any circumstances. The fewer connections between us, the safer you'll be. What if the Colombos find out? They won't. I've made sure of it. But if they do, you play ignorant. You tell them the truth that I seduced you, used you, abandoned you. You were just a waitress who got caught up in something you didn't understand. Is that what I am? He smiled sadly. No. You're the woman who taught me that ancient laws could be broken, that power could be refused, that there was a version of myself worth becoming that existed outside of violence. He kissed me once more, and then he was gone. Walking toward security, through the scanner, toward the gates that would carry him away from Boston and everything he'd known. I watched him disappear into the crowd. 6 months later, almost to the day, I received a letter. It came to Lucia's, addressed to the waitress in handwriting I recognized. Inside was a plane ticket to Buenos Aires. An address, a single sentence. Come home. I spent a week preparing. I quit my job. Marco didn't ask questions, just handed me a stack of cash and hugged me like I was his daughter. I packed 2 suitcases, one of which contained the ancient book, that artifact of a family's covenant and betrayal, the document that had changed everything. On the plane, looking down at the city of my birth, shrinking into the distance, I thought about the meaning of the oath, about how Dante had interpreted it as a law that demanded blood, and how I'd helped him understand that it could mean something else entirely. Not that blood binds us forever, But that blood, the bonds we're born into, the family that raises us, the weight of history we carry only has power if we choose to let it. I'd chosen to leave mine behind. Dante had chosen to destroy his. Together, maybe we could build something new. The apartment in Buenos Aires was small and perfect. He was waiting for me at the airport, thinner than I remembered, with stubble darkening his jaw and his scar seeming more pronounced in the South American light. He didn't run to me, he never moved that way, but his eyes found mine and held. And in that moment, standing in a terminal full of strangers, I understood that we were finally safe. Not because we were no longer in danger. The world was full of danger, and it would find us eventually, but because we'd chosen each other consciously, with full knowledge of what the other person was. And that choice was stronger than any ancient law. He took my hands. "Welcome home," he said. "This isn't home. Home is..." I stopped, because I didn't know how to finish that sentence. Home was the place you came from, the place you belonged, and I didn't belong anywhere anymore. I'd burned that bridge when I walked away from Boston. "No," he said, "but it will be. I'm going to make sure of it." He pulled me toward him, and I buried my face against his chest, and I felt him breathe. Steady, alive, present. We walked out of the airport into the brightness of Buenos Aires, and I didn't look back. The ancient oath was sitting in my suitcase, a ghost of a life we'd left behind, and every word I'd translated, every meaning I'd uncovered, had been leading us here to a moment where we could finally be something other than what the law demanded. In the end, the oath's most important secret wasn't written in any of the ancient pages. It was something Dante had learned through pain and violence, and choosing me. The law lives in the hearts of those who accept it. If you reject it, it dies with you. And in Buenos Aires, with his hand holding mine, walking toward the taxi that would take us into the rest of our lives, I felt the ancient law finally break, not with violence or betrayal or blood, but with love, and that was the only translation that had ever mattered.